Hello health champions, today I want to talk about how to lose belly fat and why intermittent fasting is a particularly good way to do that. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. Belly fat, which is a concern to millions of people, is also known as visceral fat or intra-abdominal fat. Okay, we're not talking about the love handles that sit on the outside, we're talking about the inside fat. And the main thing to know about that type of fat is that it's not about calories. I know you've heard that eating less and exercising more is the solution to everything about fat, but it just doesn't work like that. Belly fat is also known as dangerous fat, and that's not because the fat in itself is dangerous, it's because the way it comes about is dangerous to the liver. And I'm sure you've heard about alcoholic fatty liver disease, AFLD. Well, there's another kind called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So obviously the first one is because of alcohol, and the second one is not, but the second one, people have no idea where that comes from. And the answer is, it's because of fructose. But what is it that's so bad about alcohol and fructose? Well, it's because they can only be broken down by the liver. They have to be broken down by somebody, and the liver is the only one can do it, but the liver is only about 1/60th of your total body weight. So all the other fuel from fat and protein and glucose can be spread out evenly among all the other tissues for the most part, but alcohol and fructose can only go through the liver. So we're 60 times more likely to overwhelm, to congest the liver than we are the rest of the body. And whatever energy the liver can't use in the moment, that extra energy gets converted into fat, and that fat quickly starts clogging up the liver and spreading to the other visceral areas around the liver. So alcohol and fructose are the worst, and then there's two more things that make it hard for the liver, and that's the hormone insulin and the hormone cortisol. Insulin responds to blood glucose levels, and cortisol is a stress hormone that is produced in response to stress, and that raises blood sugar, which in turn then produces more insulin, so that's like a vicious cycle. Other than stress, cortisol is best known for Cushing's disease. And this is a pathology. This is where people have some kind of tumor, some abnormal tissue that is producing a hormone way out of balance. And as a result, these people have way too much cortisol, which results in extreme belly fat, extreme moon face, a big round swollen face. They get a fat hump on their back, on the upper part of their back, and they get skinny legs and flat butt because cortisol breaks down protein to try to convert it into glucose to respond to all that stress. But it's not really stress, it's just cortisol making it look like that. So Cushing's is a pathology. It's an abnormal condition with abnormal cells, but you could also have stress and have totally normal cells that do exactly what they're supposed to, but that continuous stress is pushing the body out of balance, is making it increase cortisol production, and now you have a functional disease. You have a functional hypercortisol situation. And even though stress in itself is probably not going to give you a Cushing's presentation, the look of Cushing's, it can be a very strong contributor, especially if you have a lot of stress in addition to a lot of sugar and other processed foods and maybe even alcohol. And one of the best ways to deal with stress is to practice relaxation, breathing exercises, or one of my favorites is meditation. Let's look at fructose versus carbs in general. When you eat a grain, something like rice or oats or wheat, like bread, any form of crackers or waffles, those are grains. Corn is also a grain. then those consist of starch. And starch is 100% glucose. Glucose can be spread out evenly across the body, so it's not really going to give you fatty liver by itself. It's a bad thing in addition to fructose, but it's probably not going to do it by itself. It is a problem though because it triggers insulin and it makes things a little worse. The really big problem is sugar. And sugar is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. So if you have 100 grams, which is not uncommon these days, then you're getting 50 grams of pure fructose from that. And that is going to clog up the liver very quickly. That's why we see type 2 diabetes in teenagers and even younger these days. They haven't had any alcohol, but they're drinking soda, which is just as bad. Then we have high fructose corn syrup, which is just a little bit worse. Instead of 50-50, it's about 55% fructose and 45% glucose. So what about fruit? Is fruit a good thing? We always hear that you should eat more fruits and vegetables. And what they're really trying to say is you should eat more vegetables. And fruit isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but if we look back historically, fruit was seasonal. And depending on where you lived, you had one type of fruit. You didn't have all kinds of fruits from all over the world every day of the year, because then it becomes a problem. If the fruit was seasonal, now it would just help fatten you up for the winter, and that was a good thing, because then during the winter you burned through all that belly fat and the liver fat because there was no sugar around. And fruit can contain quite a bit of fructose. If we look at pears and apples, they are the highest. They have almost 70% of all the sugar in there is fructose. So out of the total weight, about 7% of those fruits is pure fructose. Something else like watermelon is a very high percentage, but the grams, the percent fructose per 100 grams of the fruit is a little bit lower. And most other fruits are somewhere around 50%. You kind of give plus minus 5%, and you're going to find most fruits in that range. And these grams of fructose can add up pretty quickly. So if you have just one medium apple per day, that's about 12 grams of fructose. And we're just counting the fructose portion right now. And then something like watermelon, which has a lower percentage, but watermelon is so easy to eat a lot of. It's like drinking a soda. It's very thirst quenching, and it's nice when on a warm day. So you could wolf down a pound of watermelon very, very quickly. You could do 2 or 3 pounds even in a day. And 1 pound of watermelon would have 18 grams. So now you have 30 grams from just those 2 fruits. You have 30 grams of pure fructose clogging up the liver. As a comparison, that's how much you would find in a 20-ounce Coke of high fructose corn syrup. And again, the 30 grams is not the total sugar, it's the fructose part. So if you don't have fatty liver and you're not insulin resistant, then sure, you could have some fruit once in a while. But if you are insulin resistant, you have a fatty liver and you're trying to reverse it, then those fruits are going to slow you way down. So focus on the vegetables. The other substance that has to go through the liver is alcohol. And there is no mystery there. We know that excess alcohol produces a fatty liver and liver disease. That's kind of the hallmark of alcoholism. The worst drinks that you could have are mixed sugary drinks. Why is that? Because alcohol is the worst, fructose is a close second. But when you have a mixed sugary drink, you get both. And you could have actually 3 times more fructose in that drink than you have alcohol, because some of those drinks are just incredibly sweet. If you have a beer, that's second worst. Now you get the alcohol plus starch, because the beer is made from grains, so you're going to get that carbohydrate in there. It's not as bad as the fructose, because the starch is a form of glucose, but it's still going to raise insulin and promote a fatty liver in addition to that alcohol. Dry wine would be a better option because now you have the alcohol, you have a tiny amount of sugar, but probably only about 1/10 the amount that you get in a sweet drink. And if we can speak about such a thing, the best form would be distilled spirits. So again, I'm not promoting alcohol. I'm just saying that if you have an occasional drink, you want to understand what it does to you. So a distilled spirit is not going to have anything in there but the alcohol. So you only get one bad thing instead of the fructose and the glucose on top of that. Even though insulin is a stress on the liver, it's probably not going to create a fatty liver by itself. It is the alcohol and the fructose that causes the fatty liver. But once you have a fatty liver, the insulin is going to make it much harder to reverse it because the insulin keeps pushing fuel and fat and glucose into that liver. So once you have a fatty liver, you are going to be insulin resistant. That's the same thing. The fatty liver is an insulin resistant liver. And now you want to start lowering insulin. How do you do that? Well, a low carb, high fat diet is going to result in less insulin produced. If you want to take it one step further, then a keto diet is a stricter form of a low carb diet, which will produce even less insulin. And the least insulin produced is, of course, when you're fasting, because now you're not taking in any carbohydrate at all during that period. And that's why intermittent fasting can be so powerful. And now that we know what causes belly fat and fatty liver, how do we reverse it? Well, the first thing obviously is to stop feeding it this bad stuff. So no alcohol, no fructose. You eat foods that lower insulin, and you do some things to reverse stress. That's pretty obvious. Next, we need to burn some fat. All that fat in the liver, we want to convert it into energy. And what has to happen then? Well, fasting is going to lower insulin more than anything else that you can do. And as long as insulin is high, that fat is untouchable. We can't turn it into energy when insulin is high. But when insulin drops, that fat becomes liberated and now we can burn it. The second thing fasting does is it increases human growth hormone. It's the most powerful way to increase human growth hormone. So again, insulin goes down, liberates the fat. Now human growth hormone goes up and increases the burning of that fat. So the longer we fast, the more fat we burn, the more human growth hormone we make. So all of these mechanisms work in our favor when we're fasting. Everything gets better with fasting. So to burn belly fat the best and reverse fatty liver, there are 5 steps. First, do intermittent fasting, meaning you shorten the time period during a day where you're eating. A popular one is 18-6. You're eating lunch, you're eating dinner in a 6-hour time span, and then you fast the rest. That's one example. Second thing would be to eat a low carb diet, because low carb is going to keep the insulin levels lower, so you get into that fat burning zone much quicker. You want to definitely stop alcohol if you have a fatty liver, and you also want to definitely stop all sugar and fructose. The fifth thing would be to work on the cortisol, and that's meditation, breathing exercises, etc. And then a lot of people are going to wonder about exercise. Well, isn't that what we're told all the time? Eat less, exercise more. But again, it's not about calories. It's not about that. It's about the hormones. So the liver can be fatty and exercise is not going to touch it. You could actually be a marathon runner and have a fatty liver. That's happened. Exercise won't do much, but it also won't hurt you unless you do it wrong, and it can help if you do it right. So the main thing is to not go to the gym and join the boot camp and have someone whip you into shape, because that is going to drive up your cortisol tremendously. So as long as you work out in a way such as walking or riding a bike at a slow pace, now you are increasing circulation, you're using up some energy, but you're not stressing the body. So in that sense, exercise can help. If you do it wrong, it can hurt. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about how to get truly healthy, I think you really should check out that one next. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.